Hello and welcome to this Better Business Bureau webinar, Building Trust in Trying Times. Today, our topic, Surviving the Economic Downturn, the action steps for you as a business owner to take right now. We are incredibly fortunate to have with us today Terry Frisk, a certified business transition expert. The website, as you go and learn more about Terry, is B2B, as in business to business, B, letter B, the number 2, bcfo.com. B2bcfo.com is the website. Terry has more than 25 years of business experience as a general manager, controller, and chief financial officer. He is a CPA whose career has been focused on small to medium-sized privately held companies. Terry's extensive background and experience have given him the skills to assist in many different aspects of a business's financial needs. He's helped companies manage growth, forecast cash flow, increase margins, reduce employee benefit costs without compromising key components. He improves their banking relationships and obtains favorable pricing and terms from vendors. He also is an expert in the areas of strategic and long-term planning, tax planning and projections, budgeting and forecasting, systems implementation, staff training and development. That list goes on. As we have more and more people join the webinar right now, I'll let you know that this is an ongoing webinar series from Better Business Bureau. We're here each and every week with a new expert to help you survive the next 60 to 90 days, and most importantly, thrive after that. It's all about building trust in these trying times. There are a number of resources available to you through Better Business Bureau. In addition to these webinars, we have a private Facebook group for accredited businesses, and I should note that this webinar is live only for accredited businesses. So it gives you an accredited business an opportunity to interact with our guest, ask questions, and you'll see that there is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Make sure and type your questions in because we are saving some time for questions with Terry toward the end of this webinar. Also with us from the BBB team, we've got Jason Kama, who is there helping to watch those Q&A and be sure that we're all good on the technical side, along with Jamie Dillon. And thank you both for being with us and helping this run as smoothly as possible. And of course, all of you businesses that are joining us right now, thank you so much. We do keep these recorded. So if you have to step away, you can come back and look at the recording. This is also on Facebook Live. So a number of ways for you to get access to this information. With that, Terry, thank you so much for joining us. B2bcfo.com, the website. And let's dive right in as we talk about ways for businesses to survive the economic downturn and the actions that they need to take right now. Where does it start?
Well, thank you, Dale. I mean, these have certainly been interesting times. There's been a huge number of developments in the last week and a half, starting with shelter and in place orders that have gone into a number of states, culminating with the CARES Act passage, with unusual bipartisan support. So now we have some framework to start planning our short-term strategies and to overcome the crisis.
And you say communication is one of the best places to start.
Right. The first thing we want to do is communicate. I mean, we should initially communicate with our employees. You know, be transparent with the efforts you are undertaking to keep the business going and solicit their input on what can be done to maintain revenues and reduce costs. You know, your employees know that the business and have some good ideas on how to help sustain the business during this downturn. So communicate with them and get their support and input. Next, communicate with your customers. What are their needs during this crisis? And then pivot your business to address those needs. I'm currently working with a craft brewery, and as the bars and restaurants closed, their demand for beer dried up overnight. You know, no pun intended, but anyway, what they learned from their distributors is that the demand for packaged beer has increased. So they shifted their production from draft beer to packaged beer, so they could meet the increased demand on that side of the business. They also switched or they also introduced a plan for home delivery. So they're using some of these home delivery services to supplement their packaged beer sales to be delivered to home purchasers. So yeah, their sales are down, but they've been able to retain their brewery staff and operate by addressing the change in their customer needs. And then finally, communicate with your vendors. Learn how they are responding to the situation. I mean, will they be able to continue to provide goods and services to your business? Do they anticipate any delays or shortages? You know, another resource is your banker. Your banker is a vendor that I highly recommend communicating with. How can they support your business during this time? You know, we're going to talk a little more about programs that banks are offering a little bit later, but your banker is going to play a key role in providing financial assistance in the coming weeks. I know, with all the information you've gathered, you can now start to formulate a plan to get through the next few weeks.
So that leads us to the next place and the perfect, the perfect image for this. Let's talk about our cash position as a business and answering that key question. You know, do I have enough cash, and how long is it going to last? How do we start to calculate this?
Exactly. I mean, in good times, we focus on top line revenues and bottom line income. But in a downturn, you really need to focus on your cash. Like you say, do we have sufficient cash to operate in the coming weeks? And so a quick and easy way to check your current cash position is to calculate the days of cash on hand, which is a simple calculation of what's your cash balance divided by monthly operating expenses times 30 days. And that'll tell you how many days of cash you have available to operate the business. So in a simple example, we have $500,000 in cash. We have $300,000 in monthly operating expenses times 30 days. So in this particular example, we have 50 days cash available to operate the business. Another way to look at it is the days of available funds on hand. And this expands the definition to include some more liquid items, including your cash balance, add accounts receivable, add borrowed funds available from like a line of credit, and then again, divided by the monthly operating expenses times 30 days. So again, taking this example, you have $500,000 in cash, $200,000 in accounts receivable, plus $300,000 line of credit, divided by the $300,000 operating expense, and you get 100 days of operating funds available to maintain the business. And this assumes that you have no additional sales, you have no additional cash coming in. This is how long your current funds will carry the business in those times.
Let's pause right there, because before we started this webinar, you and I were having a conversation about your clients, and there's actually a breath of fresh air in this, specifically to what you're hearing out in the marketplace. So what type of customers do you serve, and what are you seeing and hearing from them right now?
Well, I have a broad gamut of customers in manufacturing, distribution, some technology, software as a service, but the bellwether is kind of the manufacturing customers, the manufacturing companies. And what I'm seeing from them is their order backlog is still strong. They haven't had a lot of cancellations. They're still taking orders. And so that's kind of a positive note, kind of a positive view that manufacturers believe this is going to be short-term and are still continuing to operate. Now, obviously, this has hit the hospitality industry pretty hard, so they're probably, you know, I would say the hospitality industry is in a recession, while the remainder of the company may not be or may not yet be in a recession due to still strong activity, available funds from banks and other programs that are keeping the money flowing.
So let's look at you've got a cash projection model that you're going to step us through. Go ahead and lead us through that process.
Yeah, I mean, I recommend you take the days funds outstanding a step further and actually build a cash flow projection. And this should be on at least a weekly basis, and in some cases, maybe even a daily basis. I once developed a cash flow model for a car dealership due to the wide swings in cash needed to fund flooring payments, and as the vehicles are sold. So it all depends upon your business, how you look at it. But I would look at least at a weekly cash flow projection. And so you start by mapping out the items you want to track. I start with cash inflows. In this case, we have customers with credit terms. So I list out the major customers individually, possibly lump in smaller companies into one line, and then add the other sources of cash. In this example, we have some internet customers, some walk-in customers, which total the total cash inflows. Next, list out the cash outflow items. I mean, I'll just show accounts payable, but you can break it out by major vendors, like we did for wholesale customers. And then add other items to complete the list of cash outflows, like a bank loan, credit cards, payments, rent, payroll, the major items in your business. And you can get as detailed as you like in this analysis to make it meaningful, make it useful for you. So next, I like to add in a 4-week history. It gives a perspective and helps identify emerging trends. So in this business, we can see there's an uptick. If you look at the internet customers line, you can see there's an uptick in week 4, maybe as a result of the shelter in place orders. People are moving to buying over the internet. One other thing I want to point out is how this flows. We start with our beginning balance. Whoops. Sorry, get my highlighter. We start with the beginning balance. Start with the beginning balance. Add your inflows, subtract cash outflows to come to the ending balance, which carries forward to the next week's beginning balance. And so this is a rolling picture of the cash inflows and cash outflows, and then the resulting balance. So now that we've looked at the 4-week history, it gives a basis to start projecting forward. And so I break this up into segments, like a 4-week segment. So we're going to first look at the next 4 weeks. And the next 4 weeks are pretty easy to predict. I mean, if you have customers with credit terms of net 30, then you're going to see, you can project out when those amounts in your accounts receivable is going to start culminating. The trend we identified in internet customers, we expect that to continue, so we project that out. Likewise with accounts payable, we know what's going to be payable in the next 4 weeks, and the fixed items like bank loans, rent, payroll, we know those are going to occur on these dates in the future. After that, we can project on out. In my example here, I go out 8 weeks. You can go out even further if that's useful. And even the 8-week period is somewhat easy to project based on what you know now. If you have orders in-house that you're going to be delivering through April, then you're going to know what the accounts receivable collections are going to be in May. Likewise with accounts payable. You see the you have control over what you're ordering, what you're purchasing, and so you have a pretty good idea of what's going to be needed to pay for those items in the future. Then you come down to the bottom line, and we can see a trend emerging here in the cash balance. So looking at this cash balance, or this cash flow projection, we're going to run out of cash in the end of 8 weeks. So now we can start formulate plans. How do we deal with this? How do we deal with this? What do we do? Are there adjustments we can make to the rent or payroll or bank loans? I find it interesting, comparison to this downturn as opposed to the recession. A lot of employers are hanging on to their employees, keeping them employed, even if they're sheltering in place. They're continuing to get paychecks. So there's been a kind of a reluctance to reduce payroll. So maybe that's not politically correct. Maybe we'll continue to pay them. But what else can we do? Maybe we could contact the bank and see if we can alter our terms. I recently worked with a client to modify the terms of their loan with the bank to interest only for the next 3 months. And then that just extends the term out another 3 months beyond the end of the term. But it was a significant cash savings for the business. Another possibility is rent. I had another client I worked with that negotiated with the landlord. Their lease was due to expire at the end of the year, so they negotiated a renewal with 3 months free rent. So they're going to have a rent holiday for the next 3 months. So if we apply that to this situation, let's say we want to interest only on the bank loan and no rent. We change the projection to show just the interest payments as well as remove the rent, and at the end of the 8-week term, we're not in bad shape. So just some simple things you can do based on identifying the key items in your cash flow projection to bolster the cash balance through this downturn, which will hopefully be short term.
And you touched on this at the beginning of the webinar, but now that we have the stimulus package in place and starting to be rolled out this week, we know that the vote took place last week. This gives business some level of confidence in moving forward on how to start planning and knowing where their payroll can be if they can go into the SBA, especially if they've got that good relationship with their banker that you mentioned. They can go to the SBA, go to their SBA lender, and start having conversations about accessing some of these funds in order to pay payroll. So let's spend the remaining minutes that we have talking about those SBA loans. There's 2 specific programs that you wanted to touch on.
Right. There's been a lot of buzz about the financial assistance becoming available through the Small Business Administration. The CARES Act has enhanced the SBA's existing lending programs to meet the current needs. And while the Treasury Department is working feverishly to provide guidance on these programs, we'll talk a little about some of the key provisions that have come out of the bill and start planning accordingly. There's 2 main programs that are being offered to businesses in response to the coronavirus emergency. First, there's the 7A program, which is an existing program offered to provide businesses with working capital. And then the second is the Emergency Injury Disaster Loan Program. Both programs are available for profit and for nonprofit businesses with fewer than 500 employees. Plus, they've included sole proprietors, independent contractors, and self-employed individuals. So they've really expanded the eligibility of these programs. However, the terms are vastly different. with a higher cap for 7A loans, but longer payment terms and lower interest rates for the EIDL loans. In addition, the 7A loans do not require collateral or personal guarantee and are approved by the local financial institutions, and as little as 36 hours, but up to 2 weeks. Now, the key portion of the bill is the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP. It was created under the CARES Act and is receiving the most of the current press. Under this program, you can apply to borrow up to 2.5 times your average monthly payroll costs for the past year to a maximum of $10 million. Now, the key component of this is the amount spent over the 8-week period after the loan origination date. Items paid on payroll costs, interest, business mortgage, rent, and utilities will be forgiven, and the business will not be taxed on the amount forgiven. I mean, that's the key piece. It's almost a federal grant, but the SBA wanted to retain some jurisdiction in order to ensure that the amounts are spent in accordance with the wishes of the act. There is one catch: that the amount forgiven may be reduced if there's a reduction in the number of employees or a 25% reduction in wages, unless that is paid by unless that is corrected by June 30th. Now, the only condition for approval is a certification by the owner that the loan is necessary to support operations. The money will be spent on designated expenses, and the borrower does not have a pending application or received a loan between February 15th and year end for coronavirus relief. So since this program just came out, there may be some businesses who have already processed an EIDL loan application. Well, they can be converted to a PPP application. So Congress gave that out. So if you've already put in an application, you can still convert to a Paycheck Protection Program. Now remember, the PPP loans are a subset of 7A loans. So the other 7A provisions apply. I think most businesses will likely opt for the PPP loans. There may be some situations where an EIDL loan would be better, possibly for a nonprofit with few paid employees and high cost for operations. I'm thinking like a food bank where they have to pay out a lot for food, but they really don't have a lot of payroll expense. It might be more advantageous for them with the lower interest and the longer payment term. But for most businesses, the PPP program is probably going to have the greatest impact. But I recommend contacting your banker. They're going to be the experts on this, and have them help guide you through this process.
Fantastic. So we've got about 8 minutes remaining, and we do have some questions coming in from viewers. And if you do have a question for Terry, use that Q&A box that is at the bottom of the webinar. We'd really appreciate it. And Roseanne has written in with a question, and she's had a number of questions. I think Terry's answered a few of them during his remarks. Do you think the money is going to be given before we all go bankrupt, is what she writes. What's the turnaround time? So, and I think she explained this a little further. They've submitted the PFL forms, and PFL stands for, so everybody's, what's the acronym?
Well, it's the form for the EIDL loan plan that's directly to the SBA, I believe.
So Roseanne writes, we've submitted the PFL forms for one of our employees, plus submitted the SBA loan application for the business. We've not heard anything for a week, not even a confirmation that they received the information. What do you suggest we do?
That's going to be a problem. The SBA is going to be overrun with requests. And so and that's one reason they've put this under the 7A program, because 7A is administered by banks. So they'll have an army of local financial institutions to process the loans, and they'll have the authority to approve and disperse the funds. So while the banks are not yet taking applications, from the sources I have through the SBA, they anticipate having the loan application available by the end of this week. And then again, the processing should be within just a few days, up to 2 weeks.
Fantastic. Okay. So interesting question that Roseanne, and we've got a number of questions that we're going to work through. So Roseanne asked also, does accepting or receiving this money from the SBA make a business more susceptible to an audit in the future?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Let's see.
I mean,
Susan
let me back into that. You're going to have to, under the PPP plan, you will have to provide documentation of how that money is spent within that 8-week period. But that documentation will be adjudicated by the bank, so it'll be submitted to the bank for them to review and approve or deny.
Okay. I'm going to go through these questions in the order that we've received them. So Taryn wrote, can you get a PPP and EID together?
No, you cannot. It's one or the other, but not both. And like I say, if you've already submitted an EID application, you can convert it to a PPP application, and your banker can help you with that.
And then that might have been answered for Stephen. If we utilize the PPP and EIDL loan program, how does that impact the ability to use the 50% payroll tax credit?
Now, the tax credit is for, I'm presuming you're talking about the tax credit for the there's another provision that's coming out of, that came out of the CARES Act, and that's well, no, it wasn't the CARES Act. It was the changes to the Family Medical Leave Act, which is going to be credits for payment on the employees who take emergency family medical leave. And those credits will not impact the PPP plan.
Okay. Let's see. Can a 7A loan, this comes from Win. Oh, I just lost it off my screen. Can a 7A loan be used for a single member LLC whose income comes from commissions that are expected to plummet this month?
Yes. Yes, they've included a single member LLC is essentially a proprietorship, and they've included that in the provisions. So yes, a single member LLC will be eligible. You'll have to be prepared to provide, well, depending on the type of business, whether you have 1099s, but some documentation of what the what your past amounts have been, your past payroll amounts or your past income has been over that 1 year measuring period.
Okay. Susan wrote, I know you can't have a 7A and PPP loan at the same time. Can you have an EIDL and PPP loan if you use the funds from PPP for payroll and EIDL for other operational costs?
Well, actually, it's kind of backwards. The PPP plan is part of 7A. And so you can have a 7A with greater than the amount of the PPP, except that the amount above the 8-week measuring period afterwards will be converted to a term note. Now, you cannot have a 7A and an EIDL loan together. It's one or the other, but not both.
Okay. Sally Joe writes, we have 8 employees. Right now, we have enough cash for 2 months. We laid off 2 employees. Would you recommend we get the loan? That's not a lot of information to to answer the question. And this is what we're dealing with, difficult times. And
again, I would consult with your banker, and it depends upon how much, what the amount was that your payroll for the 1 year measurement period. So if we're talking an average monthly payroll of a few $1,000s, it may not be worth the effort. But again, work with your bank.
Okay. Can you explain the term turnaround time? And I'm thinking that is just the amount of time it takes from when you submit the loan application until the time you get cash in your bank account.
Correct.
For the loan. So that's what turnaround
Correct.
time means.
That's what turnaround time means.
Don wrote, will EIDL only be considered as a loan, or will it be used as a grant also?
It'll only be considered as a loan. Now there's a $10,000 component that may be considered as a grant if certain circumstances are met. But unlike the PPP, it is a loan that has to be repaid over time. There's no forgiveness available on the EIDL.
Okay. And will the EIDL only be considered as a loan, or will it be used? I'm sorry. Don wrote two questions. I've just repeated it. So Don's next question is, are payroll taxes part of the payroll for the 7A?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The payroll costs will include wages, payroll taxes, the employer portion of payroll taxes, benefits such as health benefits, retirement plan contributions, and any other benefits paid to employees.
And then Debbie Bryan writes, exactly what data needs to be gathered for the PPP loan? How are you deriving at 8 weeks?
The data for the application is your historical payroll amounts. So they're going to want to see payroll registers to calculate out how much payroll was paid over the last year. And then moving forward, that 8-week measurement period. And here's a thought I've had was if you get a PPP loan, deposit that money in a separate bank account, and then pay those costs that are those eligible costs straight out of that account, as opposed to your commingling your general account. And then you have a very good accounting as to how that money was spent.
Okay. Brandy writes, just to clarify, is there currently a way to apply for the PPP program?
Not as of today, but they expect to have the application process available by the end of the week. So banks that were previously preferred lenders, preferred 7A lenders, they have the immediate ability to approve those loans. There's the Treasury is going to make it available to other banks, because not all banks are preferred 7A lenders, but they're going to open it up to additional financial institutions to process these loans. And that process may take longer. So you'll have to check with your individual bank. Obviously, the larger banks are preferred lenders. Smaller banks are going to be kind of hit and miss. But that's the key question. Are they currently a preferred lender to process these loans? And if not, how long will that take?
Why does the EIDL loan have such a longer turnaround time than the 7A?
The EIDL loan is processed through the Small Business Administration, and they have a limited amount of staff to process these applications. So that's typically always been the case. It takes 3 to 6 months to get the approval on an EIDL loan.
Okay. Taryn writes that Taryn has a small business of 6 people. Should I keep them on for the PPP?
You know, that's going to be your decision. I mean, that's the intent of the PPP. Even if they're unable to work, you can still pay them with the funds, and it's a grant from the government. So if you apply, get the money, you can pay the employees even though they may not be able to work, and have some hope of retaining them and providing them an income in this interim period. I mean, I do have a client that is completely shut down, and they're continuing to pay their employees through the short term in anticipation of being able to obtain these funds in order to pay them over a longer period of time. Because it costs a lot of money to, as you all know, to recruit, find, train, bring new people on board. And so, if we can just get over the hump, if they can truly process these applications in the next 2 to 3 weeks, it might be well worth your while to keep those people on the payroll and use the available funds to bridge that gap until they're able to come back to work.
Okay. We're about 6 minutes over our time. Terry, I want to be cognizant of your time. Our questions are outpacing the amount of time that we're answering them. How are you doing? Are you able to stick with us and answer a few more questions?
Sure.
Okay. So in the chat box from Les, have a company that Les is the only person working for that company, Les Wolf Sports, LLC. Is Les eligible for a loan or a grant? He has no employees. And my reading of the what's come out is yes.
Correct.
He would be. Okay.
It would be.
What if, regarding the PPP loan, Mike chatted, what if a new hire came on in the last 2 months? It's based on your payroll from January and February of this year, correct?
Well, the main measurement is the average monthly payroll over the past year, from a year
Okay.
from the time you apply. Now, there's some different rules for new businesses. So if you weren't in business as of February 15th of 2019, then there's a shorter measurement period. I think from the January 30th or February 15th, I don't remember which off the top of my head, of this year through the end of March. So you've got another possibility of how to measure the average monthly payroll. And then seasonal businesses have a different calculation that they use.
Okay. Eileen writes, according to the SBA EIDL and emergency grant info from our U.S. Senator, it states if you apply for an EIDL and the grant, you can still apply for the Paycheck Protection Loan. However, the amount forgiven under a PPP loan will be decreased by the $10,000 grant. Is this info correct? Can we only apply for EIDL or PPP?
Now, my understanding is it's one or the other, but not both. You can apply for the EIDL or the PPP, but you cannot apply for both. In fact, it's pretty straightforward that if you have applied for EIDL, you can convert to a PPP, but you cannot apply and obtain funds for both.
Okay. And this is another great example of an opportunity to get in touch with your SBA banker, who should also
Right.
have a number of these resources at his or her disposal. Should I go to the bank or SBA to start the PPP?
I would go to the bank.
Okay.
I would start with your bank, because if you try to call the SBA, you're probably going to sit on hold for some time. I did try to, before the PPP came out, I did try to submit an EIDL application, and the website just crashed. So was unable to submit that data. And then they, talk about the modification to the 7A program came out, and so we held off, and that's what we're going to do with this particular case.
Okay. Stephen writes, the CARES Act has a small business tax provision to allow a tax credit of 50% of wages up to $10,000 per quarter per employee. This is not available if we use the PPP. Is this available if we use a regular 7A working capital loan?
You know, I don't have an answer to that.
Okay.
I haven't researched that particular. There's so much coming out of this act that you know, and then the other item is the Treasury is still working on it. As you might imagine, there are a lot of loose ends, a lot of items that had to be addressed in the guidance. So what we talk about today may be different tomorrow.
I was going to say, Terry, based on how new all of this information is and how well you know it already, I think I can speak for all of us. We're very impressed and we're grateful to have you providing this for us. So definitely, it's going to be changing. If, let's see, I am a one-person S Corp, do I still qualify for a 7A?
Yes.
Mark wrote that. Okay.
Yes. Like I say, they expanded the eligibility.
Okay.
So it includes these particular entities that were precluded from applying for 7A loans.
If you apply for PPP and don't get it for whatever reason, can you then turn around and apply for EIDL?
I'm sure you can.
Okay. Don wrote, if you get a 7A loan for the maximum based on your 2.5 times payroll, and at the end of the 8 weeks, you only use 50% of the loan amount for payroll, rent, I understand that is turned into a grant. How can you use the other 50%?
Well, the amount that you can support is forgiven. The additional amount is converted into a loan with typically a 10-year payout, and I believe it's going to be 4% interest, and that's somewhat driven by the bank. I mean, the bank is participating in the loan provision piece of it.
Okay. Debbie writes, oh, great idea for setting up another account for the loan. Anonymous writes, besides the census we were sent and submitted, what else do we need to send in for relief for our family and children and small businesses? Any benefits provided automatically?
Any benefits provided automatically?
I think, you know, that'll be the $1,200 per person making under 75,000. All of that is going to come in. That's going to be automatic. If your average monthly payroll cost is $75,000, do I assume that the PPP loan amount could be $187,500? And what are the requirements for forgiveness?
Yes.
Wrote Mark.
I mean, if your average payroll, including taxes and benefits, is $75,000 a month, you just multiply that by 2.5, which was what, 187, and that would be the eligible loan amount under PPP. Okay. And then that money has to be used for payroll costs, including benefits, rent, mortgage interest, that's commercial mortgage interest, and then utilities over the 8-week period after the loan origination.
Kaza asks, I believe I'm going to reword this and hopefully I get it right. What is considered collateral for the EIDL?
You know, it's going to be equipment and you know, basically the assets of the company, the assets of the business, and it's potentially will require a personal guarantee.
Okay. Hey, Andrew writes, and I'll take a stab at answering this question. What can we tell our folks about assistance coming their way directly? There's just too much conflicting information. Terry's alluded to this already. We're seeing changes. The government agencies are trying to figure out how to administer this. I would say watching the SBA website directly, sba.gov, and then the IRS website are the two places to get the most up-to-date, accurate information. The SBA related to business and the IRS related to the personal assistance that's included in this bill. Any other insight on that, Terry?
Well, I think the BBB has a lot of information available as well in terms of how to proceed and what assistance is available.
And we are vetting, yes, absolutely, and we are vetting that. And I'll ask Jamie and Jason to post a link to our page that is up, and thank you for that. John wrote, if we were not providing medical, and because spouses have been laid off, can we provide health coverage for the employee? I'm not sure I can understand the way the question that's being asked specifically. Not providing medical because spouses have been laid off. Can we provide health coverage for an employee?
Well, let me take a stab at it. So the company hasn't provided health coverage for that 1 year measurement period. So the average payroll amount will exclude health benefits. But the 8-week measurement period after you receive the loan, if you have a health plan in place, I'm sure you can add those amounts in to be in compliance with the way the money is spent. So I have not seen anything that would say if you didn't have health coverage before and you added it now, that's not going to be eligible. In fact, I'm sure it'd be quite the contrary. The plan, when Congress passed this plan, they want to be very liberal in terms of getting employees paid and retaining their benefits.
Okay. Will the PPP cover payroll if the employees work shorter hours and I continue paying more hours than actually worked?
You're going to have to do the math on that. And there is a provision that says the amount of eligible expenditures in that 8-week period, if it falls below, if the wage amount falls below a certain level, and let's see, I have that back here on the slide, right? The amount of forgiveness is reduced if there is a reduction in the number of employees or a reduction greater than 25% in the wages paid to employees.
Okay.
So, but you have until June 30th to correct that. Now, I mean, I don't quite understand the June 30th date because this program is available through the end of the year. So even if you don't apply today, even if you're not impacted by the downturn today, maybe down the road in September, if it becomes an issue, you can still apply. But I'm not quite sure how that June 30th date would fit into that.
Aaron writes, will the PPP cover payroll if my employees work? Oh, I'm sorry, we've already answered that. Keeping track of this running list of questions bouncing on my screen. An anonymous person says, as a business owner, would we use PPP funds to pay employees that are 1099'd?
No.
Okay.
No, and I know there's a lot of confusion over that. The way I've seen it presented in certain cases, it almost sounds like 1099 contractors are included as employees. But I think the intent of that is that if you're a 1099 contractor, you can apply yourself and not the company that is paying you the 1099 income.
So Matthew writes, I laid off employees on March 16th as my business needed to close. Should I get a PPP loan and then bring them back and put them on payroll even though we are closed?
Well, that was kind of the intent of the bill.
Okay.
And you can certainly do that. that Congress wants you to put people back to work as quickly as possible. So I mean, there's no restriction. There's nothing that says that they have to come back to work, but they have to be paid. So, I mean, that's kind of a business decision you're going to have to make.
Okay. Mark writes, can you apply for a PPP loan if you are still operational and deemed as essential during this crisis, as an essential business?
Well, that's going to be part of the guidance. I mean, looking at the slide that's on the screen and the borrow certification, number one is economic conditions make loan requests necessary to support ongoing operations. Now, there's going to be some judgment involved in if a business that has not seen any impact of the downturn is eligible. I mean, there are operations like grocery stores or drugstores who, quite the contrary, have seen an uptick in economic activity. I don't think that's the intent of the program, and I'm not sure. It's one thing you're going to have to talk to your SBA advisor at your bank about whether that kind of a business will be eligible. But again, who knows? Who knows where we're going to be 2 months, 6 months from now? I can foresee businesses that even if if the shelter-in-place orders go away, people go back to work, I can see a downturn for some businesses coming in late summer, early fall, and that might be the time that the funds would be needed.
Okay. An anonymous viewer wrote, if we place our employees on furlough partial layoff and have the staff collect partial unemployment, can we still apply for a PPP to help pay for employee health insurance and other payroll expenses?
Yes. Yes. Again, the amount of forgiveness is going to be based on the math, whether it covers the amount of the loan that was drawn, even though they may be working partially. And once again, the amount of forgiveness is potentially reduced if the actual payroll during that 8-week period is less than the average over the last year.
Okay. Mary is asking 2 questions. I'm gonna read them both off, and I think I know the answer to the second question, Terry. So while you formulate the answer to the first question, I'll answer her second question. So Mary, first question says, so the PPP will pay for payroll taxes, rent, and utilities. What about the other expenses that you've accrued? And then she also asks, as a self-employed person, how would I get paid? As a self-employed person, I believe that's the individual applying for the personal side of the stimulus package, correct? And that falls under that 1099 that you talked about earlier.
Well, the sole proprietors, single member LLCs, the single member S corps have been included in this plan. So if you're experiencing a downturn, you can certainly apply under the PPP.
Okay, so that would just be through your SBA lender would be the best way to do that.
Right.
And then she also asked about the other expenses accrued outside of payroll, taxes, rent, and utilities.
Well, the guidance hasn't come out yet. I'm not sure about like payroll processing fees. The fees you have to pay your payroll processor. I kind of doubt whether they're going to be included. I think it's going to be the direct payments to employees or on behalf of employees. So wages, benefits that are provided to employees. The wages will include paid time off, vacation time, any paid sick leave, although there's some caveats there in terms of the emergency family leave, which there's some tax credits that go along with that.
Okay. Caitlin writes, are taxes included as part of the payroll costs for the PP? I've read conflicting information, want to be sure.
Yes, payroll taxes. Payroll taxes are. That includes your federal unemployment, state unemployment. It includes your Social Security, and any other payroll taxes that you pay in your jurisdiction.
Okay. Anonymous writes, are you able to use the funds from PPP to cover any amounts for mortgage and utilities if your business is home-based? We own a small mobile business, so our home is the office.
You know, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't have an answer to that one. You know, that would be something that I'm sure would come out in the federal guidance. It might be a possibility that can be allocated. The amount of the mortgage interest that relates to the home business.
Okay. Roseanne, can a 7A loan be used as mortgage for land payments?
I guess it depends upon how the land is used. If it's used in the actual business, potentially. If it's, you know, if you're buying land with it, no, it has to be an existing mortgage as of February 15th. The mortgage has to be in place February 15th, so you can't use the funds to go out and buy land. But if the land was previously in the business, the mortgage was prior to the February 15th date, and the land is vital to the business, I would think so. But again, you know, that's going to be one of those items that, depending upon the final rules that come out from the Treasury, that would determine the outcome.
Okay. Victoria writes, can you pay employees with the PPP that have stopped coming to work due to being worried about COVID-19?
There's no real restrictions as to, you know, whatever reason they're being paid for. If they're being paid for a being sheltered in place, or whether they're being paid for actually coming to work and work, the idea is to be able to put the employees on the payroll.
And they can be working from home or sheltered in place. Okay.
Right.
So, Terry, we just answered 40 questions in a rapid fire succession. And Roger got one more in before we roll this up. Roger writes, should we include per diem pay in our payroll calculations?
No, that's a reimbursement.
Okay.
The per diem pay is, yeah, that would be a reimbursement. So no, that would not be included.
And Terry, you graciously stayed with us on this webinar for an additional 30 minutes answering those questions. Thank you so much. I will remind folks that they can find Terry at b2bcfo.com. Further questions, be watching the B2B webpage that is in the chat feature here. Also, this will be recorded, and this webinar will be placed on our YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe there. A lot of information for small business coming from Better Business Bureau, constantly updated thanks to Jamie Dillon, Jason, and the amazing marketing team at Better Business Bureau as we work to build trust in these trying times. Thank you so much for joining this webinar.